I'm an Oxford student, and today I'm going to be sharing with you 4 tips which really help me skim effectively. And at the end of this video, I'm going to be giving you a real-life example where I'm going to be skim reading through an article to show you how I trace my eye movements, how I'm implementing these techniques, so that you can also integrate these tips into your own study skills. Skim reading is a very important technique to have, especially if you're studying humanities or you're wanting to study humanities, because sometimes the workload, the reading lists are very long. For example, for some of my essays, I need to read 6 or 7 articles or books or chapters for a single essay within a week. And that can lead up to over 300 to 600 pages in a single week that I have to cover alongside writing 2 essays. So skim reading is a tool which has really helped me, and I really hope will help you as well. So first of all, the first main tip that I'll recommend you to get is to understand how you process information the best. Everyone can process information in a different way. Some people are visual learners, some people are audio learners, some people are reading, all these different ideas. And in the same way, we all skim in a different way. Some people that I know like skimming straight down the page. So for example, if there's a page like this, they'll just skim straight down the middle. Some like skimming in a zigzag pattern. Some would just skim across like that, diagonally. It really depends on how you learn most. And by experimenting, by trying different ways of skimming, you'll understand what works best for you. Because at the end of the day, our brains process information in a slightly different way, but also it really depends on what is most effective. For example, skimming in kind of a triangular way, which I will do and I'll show you later, might get you actually more information from the page. But if you skim straight down, you might get a bit less information, but you might do it faster. So you really want to understand what way is best for you and which ones are more effective. The second tip that you really need to do for skim reading is that you want to practice. Practice is so important with skim reading because the reality is skim reading is a skill. It's not something people are born with. You're not born with the ability to skim read everything. Of course, you might be more attuned to it. Your brain might just naturally process information quicker. But the reality is you still have to develop that. You could be a very good natural born reader and take a long time to develop skim reading, or you could be a very poor natural born reader, but since you're practicing, you're reading a lot, you would be able to develop those skills quicker. A very good way to practice is to just skim through fiction. If you like a story, your friend recommends you a book, just pick it up, just skim through it, read through it, and just practice that skills. Can I read it quicker? Can I read the next book quicker? Can I process the pages quicker? Can I process information better? Just try to figure out, skim through more pages, and the more pages you get, the repetitiveness you do, the more you do it, the better you'll get at skim reading. The third tip that you want to do is to test yourself with knowledge retention. After you've skimmed a page, go write some notes down on that page. Write some notes of what you've just read and then see whether that matches up. Are you getting a good understanding of it? Because making sure you understand what you're skimming is more important than actual skimming yourself. As much as you want to read quickly for skimming, which is completely understandable, you have to bear in mind that if you skim and don't get any knowledge from it at all, then it defeats the whole purpose in the first place. The reason why you're skimming is because there's something important that you want to read, that you want to get important elements out of that context. You want to figure out perhaps the 10% of that massive book, which is 300 pages long, that 30 pages, which would impact your essay, your understanding, your knowledge that you want to apply in your assignment, your research, without having to read through the whole 300 pages as if you need to do that in great detail. And in the same way, you want to make sure that you understand what you're reading, because if you don't understand what you're reading, what's the point of reading in the first place? So skimming should always be put under the broader bracket and understanding of I need to learn more, I need to understand more. So make sure that although you're skimming, and that's all well and good, you must be able to understand what you have just skimmed. Now, finally, a tip, and this is something we talked about in our video on how to read more, which you can check, I'll put in the card above. But you always want to know what you're looking for. When you're reading, you always are reading for a purpose. You're reading fiction to enjoy it. You're reading academic work to understand the arguments. You're reading a summary to understand what the argument is being provided by a certain thinker or a certain movement. In the same way, when you're skimming, you want to understand, what am I skimming this book for? For example, if I'm trying to read the Bible and I want to figure out what is about salvation, for example, I'll just skim through the New Testament and I'll be like, okay, this point has nothing to do with salvation. It's nice, but it's got nothing to do with salvation. I'll continue skimming until I find someplace which has got something to do with salvation, right? You have your mind, you're focusing on that, and then you understand what it becomes. So you have to understand the message in what you're trying to achieve, and just skim through so that you're just keeping your eye out for the certain things that you're trying to develop towards. So ultimately, a very core tip is that skim reading is not only about gaining information quickly, but also discovering the parts which is important for you to understand, the parts which you need to learn more about. So with that dual dynamic, half of your brain is like, I'm looking for these certain themes, and the other half of the brain is, how can I go through this quickly while understanding what I'm talking about? Putting those two together, you get the whole picture of skim reading. So those are really the 4 tips of how you want to skim read. Let me know your questions in the comments below. But now I'll end off this video by opening up a document. Here you have it. I would basically, to show you how I'm doing this, you could see my track, my mouse, and I'll show you where my eyes are looking at when I am indeed using this mouse. So this is just an essay or an article on by Nicholas Berdyaev, Existentialist Personalism. It's a movement in philosophy. So I'll just show you how I might skim through a few pages. So I'm starting off, I'm thinking, okay, what am I wanting from this? I want to figure out what is Nicholas Berdyaev's contribution to the existentialist movement, or existentialist Christianity, or existentialist personalism, and how he interacts with other people. So, okay, I'll start skimming like this, right? I'll be like, okay, I'll just skim like that. And then here I would already be saying, okay, what did I pick out from that, right? You notice how quickly I went through it. I picked out, okay, he is a Russian philosopher. Okay, he talked with he was influenced by Jakob Bohm, and then of course he had some influence with existential philosophy. Freedom was very important. Freedom being prior to being, that is an interesting element. Then I've also talked about Maritain and these things. Maritain, I think that's how you pronounce it. Gnostic deviations. He had some influences and interactions with this group of Catholic philosophers. And then, of course, there's elements of existentialist Sartre and also some differences here. Now, I'll continue skimming like, okay, well, all right, Berdyaev thought, and I'll be just skimming down like this. So here I've already picked up some further elements. So I was like, okay, there's a relationship with Berdyaev and the German idealists, okay, with my philosophical knowledge. Because sometimes when you're skimming, the more you know about the field, that better it is. I'll be saying, okay, here there is some elements and discussions on the German idealists. There's some ideas and discussions on the philosophy of it. So I'm like, okay, here, German idealist, that fits us into Kant. Well, Kant, technically an idealist, I guess, transcendental idealist. And so there's that element there. He has some Russian version of existentialism, personalism. You could have some influence of Dostoevsky there potentially. And then, of course, here I was like, yes, I skimmed out German idealists. Here, Kant comes back up again. Jakob Bohm comes again with the use of Ungrund, which actually comes from his book Freedom and the Destiny of Man, where he analyzes that a bit more. And then you're like, okay, well, here there is some Kant, a bit more about Kant. And then maybe if I was trying to research his relationship with Kant, then I'll be like, okay, I've skimmed to a point where they're talking about Kant. Okay, I'm going to slow down, and then I'm going to spend time to analyze this passage. And maybe since they talked about German idealists, I'll spend some more time analyzing these 2 passages. And then I'll continue skimming. I'll be like, okay, yeah, what does this talk about? And I'll be like, just continue skimming down. And then I'll be thinking, okay, yep, here, okay, yes, there's some ideas about with some French, his French counterpart. So if I was interested in reading, and this is why I'm talking about the importance to understand why you're reading, I'll be like, okay, if I was reading this about his relationship with the French existentialists instead, then I'll be, okay, here are some French existentialists. Yep, time to slow down. Because skimming doesn't mean skim through the whole thing. It's also meaning, as I've said, skim to the points where you actually need to understand what is really arguing. So you're like, okay, Maritain, what he's saying, what is Sartre saying, and how does that interact with the framework for ontology? Okay, what does Berdyaev said? And okay, now I'm just continuing to skim, and okay, there's a bit of Heidegger, but I'm talking about French, so I don't really need that. I'm talking about existentialist personalism. I don't need a bit of Augustinian philosophy. And then I'll just continue skimming down. Ontology of being and nothingness, that's Sartre. If I was talking about Kant, I'll continue skimming. But since if I'm looking for French ideas, then okay, I'll look for that a bit more, maybe read a bit more here. How does that tie in? I'll continue skimming down there. And then I'll be like, okay, what the idea of perfection? Okay, am I thinking about the idea of perfection? Is that important for me? Maybe yes, maybe no, depending on what I read in more depth here. Berdyaev, like Kant, was I thinking about Kantian philosophy, German philosophy? What am I looking for? Then I'll either read this or continue skimming down, because I'm like, okay, that's about Kant, that's about Descartes, about Augustine. Is that something I'm looking for? If not, then I'll continue reading on. And then you got Thomistic characterization of the relation of God and then I'll just continue skimming down, and I'll be like, okay, yep, there's some things talking about Ungrund here, about pure will, Abyss, and then after that, if you're looking at that, if you're looking at his relationship with Bohm, then you look at that a bit more. But if not, then you carry on reading. You're like, okay, Schopenhauer says something over here. Am I interested in Schopenhauer? Yes, no. Let's see how it goes. Let's continue analyzing down. Okay, this is more about the Ungrund. And then we just continue skimming down. Moral imperative, that's Kantian. And as you can see here, it actually does say it's Kantian. And you're skimming down, done. Finish reading the whole essay. Now, I understand that is quite a brief, I guess, summary of how you might interact with a page. And I know it's a bit difficult for me to kind of speak and process what I'm doing while I'm actually skimming the page. But I hope that's given you a good example of how you can really skim read a long article, which is like, I don't know how many pages this is, like 10 pages long article within 5 minutes, actually. So that's something how you can practice your skimming. Like always, let me know your questions in the comments below. Let me know what you want to see in this video more. For more study tips and advice, I'll really happily see your opinions there. Stay safe, my friends. See you soon. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. I'll see you in the next one.